was trying to provoke me into overreacting, to make me the villain she'd failed to prove I was. Instead, I did nothing. I cleaned it up. I waved politely when she glared from her balcony. I fixed my fence, swept my steps, watered my plant. Silence, after all, was gasoline on her fire. Then came the email, from her property listing service. Your account has been flagged for fraud. I didn't have an account with them, but someone had created one under my name, listing my cabin as an illegal short-term rental with fake reviews. My address, my photos, my name. It was clever, the perfect trap. If the county caught that, it'd look like I was the one running unlicensed rentals, not her. I contacted the company immediately, sent proof, and had it taken down within hours. But I knew who'd done it. And this time, I wasn't letting it slide. I called Rick again. I'm filing harassment formally, I said. Digital impersonation, vandalism, property intrusion. All of it. He whistled low. You sure? That'll drag her through court again. I'm sure, I said. She wants a show. Let's give her one, under oath. He filed the report that afternoon. The next morning, Karen's music stopped. The Pearl went dark again. Her car disappeared. A moving truck showed up 2 days later, half full, driven by a man who looked tired and underpaid. He loaded furniture, boxes, and the last pieces of her crumbling deck. I didn't see Karen until evening. She walked alone on the beach, shoes in hand, eyes red. She stopped near the tide line, staring at the horizon. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't look angry. She just looked empty. When she noticed me, she didn't shout or sneer. She just said quietly, I built everything for nothing, didn't I? I didn't answer. She looked down at the water and whispered, the tide always takes it back. Then she turned and walked away, leaving footprints that faded in seconds. That night, the Pearl went completely dark. When I bought the beach cabin, it wasn't to impress anyone. It was old, weathered, and small, just big enough for me, my tools, and the sound of waves hitting the stilts beneath the deck. I didn't paint it pastel blue or hang driftwood signs that said, Beach Life. I just fixed what needed fixing and let the sea do the rest. But somehow, that modest approach made Karen furious. She owned the massive, glass-fronted, modern villa 3 doors down, a vacation rental she called the Pearl. Everyone else called it the Karen. She didn't like that my rustic cabin sat between her polished investment and the sunset. The first time she complained, it was about my porch light being too yellow. Then it was the sound of my wind chime, apparently disruptive to paying guests. I smiled through every complaint, taking mental notes, not giving her the satisfaction of conflict. But then came that summer weekend, the one that changed everything. It started on a Friday afternoon. I'd just come back from a week of work inland and noticed footprints in the sand near my cabin door. They weren't mine. I always approached from the back stairs. The front lock was scratched, the doorknob slightly loose. Inside, things were rearranged, subtle things. My coffee mug was on the wrong counter. A throw blanket folded differently. And worst of all, my fridge was empty except for an open carton of orange juice that wasn't mine. The pulp floated on top like it had been sitting all day. I froze, scanning for signs of a forced entry. Then I noticed something, a folded note on the counter. It read, Thanks for letting us crash here. We'll leave it cleaner than we found it, smiley face, J+T. I didn't know any J or T. My name wasn't on the Airbnb registry. My cabin wasn't for rent. I looked around again and found a phone charger plugged into my outlet, pink, glittery, and definitely not mine. I walked straight to the Pearl. Karen was outside watering her hydrangeas, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and an expression that could curdle milk. When she saw me, she smiled that smug, stretched smile of someone preparing a lie. Oh, hi. Everything okay? She said, dragging out the okay like she already knew it wasn't. I held up the note. Who's J&T? She blinked innocently. Guessed. They're staying here for the weekend. In my cabin. That made her flinch, but she quickly recovered. Oh. Well, there was a mix-up, I think. My property manager must have given them the wrong key. Honest mistake. Your property manager broke into my cabin? She bristled. No need to exaggerate. They said it was open. It wasn't. Karen tilted her head, her earrings glinting in the sun. Well, maybe they thought it was part of the Pearl's amenities. It's all connected beachfront, right? Same sand. Same sand. That line told me everything. To her, boundaries didn't exist. The entire beach, and apparently my cabin, was an accessory to her brand. I kept my tone calm, even amused. So, to clarify, your guests broke into my private property, used my fridge, and slept in my bed? She gave that fake laugh people use when they're cornered. You make it sound so dramatic. They just needed a place to crash before check-in. I leaned in. And you knew? Her eyes flicked to the side. Maybe. I mean, I didn't want to leave them stranded. So you told them to use my cabin. It's just a small thing, really. You weren't here. No harm done. That was the moment I stopped playing nice. I didn't shout or threaten. I just smiled. All right, Karen. I'll take care of it. That evening, I waited until sunset and walked down the beach toward my cabin again. The lights were on inside. Laughter drifted out through the open window. 2 voices, a man and a woman. I could smell grilled fish and cheap wine. They were comfortable. Too comfortable. I crept up the stairs and peeked through the screen door. There they were, late 20s, sunburned, wearing matching shirts that said, Salt Life. My blanket was on their lap. My couch had sand all over it. My surfboard leaned in the corner with a towel draped over it like decoration. They weren't thieves, they were tourists. Entitled, clueless, and completely convinced the world was their Airbnb. I stepped inside. Enjoying your stay? The woman gasped. The man jumped up, holding a fork like a weapon. Oh my God, you scared us. I live here, I said flatly. You're trespassing. Oh, Karen said. The woman started, but I cut her off. Karen lies. Start packing. They exchanged panicked looks. We didn't mean any harm, the guy said. We thought this was part of her rental property. It's not. And now it's part of a police report. That word, police, got them moving fast. They scrambled to grab their things, apologizing as they went. But when they got to the door, I noticed something. One of my security cameras, the one I had mounted under the eave, was gone. The mount was empty. Where's my camera? I asked. They froze. Oh, that, the guy said. Karen said it was recording her guests, so she took it down. Said it wasn't legal. I clenched my jaw. Karen had entered my property, removed my security device, and sent people to sleep in my bed. That wasn't just entitlement, that was control. She didn't just want my cabin gone. She wanted ownership of it, even if just symbolically. I let them go. They ran down the beach toward the Pearl, leaving the screen door swinging behind them. I didn't lock it this time. Instead, I walked to Karen's villa. Through the glass front, I could see her laughing with them, wine glasses raised like nothing had happened. The lights inside reflected on the tide, smug and golden. The next morning, I got to work. I changed the locks, reinstalled the security camera, and bolted the windows from inside. Then I did something I knew Karen would hate. I called the county inspector. The kind of person who loves paperwork more than sunshine. Within 2 hours, a white truck was parked in front of the Pearl, and Karen's unregistered guest house extension was being photographed. She stormed out in yoga pants and fury. You petty little. Good morning, I said, sipping coffee on my porch. Lovely weather. She glared. You'll regret this. I smiled. Doubtful. By noon, her guests were gone again, this time looking less like influencers and more like fugitives. But that night, as the tide came in and the sea reached the bottom steps of my deck, I heard something again, voices, laughter, and the creak of my door. I turned off my light, waited, and listened. Someone was inside my cabin. Again. This time, I didn't go to Karen. I didn't knock. I didn't call anyone. I just walked around to the back, slipped the bolt across the heavy storm latch from the outside, and secured it tight. My cabin sat low, tidewater lapped at the supports beneath. I waited on the sand, listening to the waves rising inch by inch. Inside, the laughter stopped. Someone jiggled the handle. Then came muffled voices, confused and panicked. I smiled faintly, hands in my pockets, and whispered to myself, "Let's see how long they stay for this tide." The morning after I caught Karen with the crowbar, the world felt strangely calm. The sun came up clean and gold over the water, gulls hovered in the breeze, and for the first time in weeks, there wasn't a single footprint in the sand outside my door. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like the silence before a storm. Because Karen wasn't gone, she was retreating. And when Karen retreated, it was only to reload. I spent the day doing small things. Tightening the railings, cleaning salt off the windows, replacing the locks just in case. I even went into town for supplies. Paint, new hinges, and a proper security floodlight. But when I came back, something was waiting on my porch. A single white envelope. Type. No return address. Inside was a printed document. Summons, civil harassment restraining order. I actually laughed. The nerve of her. She'd tried everything. Lies, sabotage, rumor, and now she was trying to flip the script. I read the complaint carefully. According to Karen, I'd stalked, intimidated, and confined her guests unlawfully. She claimed I'd used surveillance devices in a manner designed to harass and record private citizens. The kicker, she was seeking damages for emotional distress and property devaluation. Classic Karen. Turning herself from aggressor to victim, rewriting the whole narrative in her favor. But the thing about lies is, they fall apart under real light. The hearing date was set for the following Friday. I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't need one. I had documents, police reports, time-stamped photos, and 3 witnesses. The deputy, the inspector, and the mother who'd brought me coffee. Truth, unlike Karen, doesn't need embellishment. When Friday came, the county courthouse was humid and slow. Karen arrived first, wearing a white blazer, pearls, and the smug composure of someone rehearsed. She avoided looking at me. Her lawyer, a sharp man in a navy suit, whispered in her ear like a stage director before curtain. When the judge called our case, she launched into performance mode. "Your Honor," she began, voice trembling with perfectly practiced fragility, "for months I've endured intimidation and invasion of privacy. This man has built structures to obstruct my property, used cameras to spy on me, and even trapped guests during a rental stay." The judge frowned. "Trapped?" "Yes. He locked them inside during high tide." "Were the guests tenants of yours?" "Yes, well, they were short-term renters." "But did they have permission to enter his property?" Karen hesitated. "They believed they did." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Collins?" I kept my voice level. "They broke in. Twice. I reported it both times. I also have footage, though one camera was later vandalized." I slid the photos across. Timestamps, police reports, repair receipt. The only thing I locked was my own door. The judge scanned them. Karen's lawyer objected, citing privacy concerns. The judge waved him off. "These are official records." Karen's voice cracked. "He's manipulating this entire community, Your Honor. He's turned everyone against me." The judge looked unimpressed. "Ms. Trent, this is a civil hearing, not a social forum. Do you have proof of harassment?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something, but it was clear she didn't have any. After reviewing everything, the judge sighed and said the words I'd been waiting for: "Petition denied." And Ms. Trent, filing false claims can itself be considered harassment. I suggest you both maintain distance. Karen's face went slack. She tried to speak, but the gavel fell before she could. Outside the courthouse, she caught up to me in the parking lot. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "This isn't over." It never is with you, I said. But it's getting boring. She flinched like I'd slapped her, then turned and stalked off toward her car. Her lawyer trailed behind, shaking his head. For the next few days, she disappeared completely. No balcony pacing, no yelling at contractors, no new guests. Even her car vanished. The Pearl sat dark at night, windows shuttered. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then, one evening, I saw the lights flick on again, but not in the usual way. The whole villa glowed like a movie set. Music thumped. Laughter spilled out onto the beach. Karen was back, and she'd brought reinforcements, or rather, witnesses. By the next morning, my property line looked like a construction zone. She'd hired a new crew, complete with a foreman, scaffolding, and a shiny metal sign that read, "The Pearl. Grand reopening, expanded luxury deck coming soon." I couldn't help laughing. "You never learn," I muttered. Her expansion, of course, was exactly where her old one had stood, the same 3 feet of sand that technically crossed into my parcel. Maybe she thought I wouldn't push it after court. Maybe she thought she'd worn me down. I didn't stop her. Not immediately. I watched as they worked, hammering, sawing, setting new footings deep into my boundary. Every nail, every board, was another line of evidence. 3 days later, I invited the same county inspector who'd come after the first storm. He arrived, clipboard in hand, eyebrows raised. "Didn't she lose this deck to the tide?" "She's rebuilding," I said. "On my land." He nodded grimly. "We'll verify." Within an hour, his measuring team confirmed it. 4 feet over the property line, unpermitted, in violation of zoning code. I didn't even need to file a complaint this time. The inspector did it himself. That night, Karen confronted me again, face red, hands shaking. "You did this," she screamed from her porch. "You're obsessed with me." "Actually," I said, "you keep building things on me. You're sabotaging my business. Nature already did that once. You're evil." I smiled. "I'm punctual." Her fury broke into a choked sound, half sob, half growl. "They're making me tear it down. Again. Do you know how much that costs?" "About what I spent fixing your damage," I said. She stared at me, trembling, mascara streaking. "I'll make you pay. If it's the last thing I do." "Careful," I said. "Last things tend to sneak up quick out here." She stormed inside and slammed the door. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. But Karen wasn't done imploding, she was only getting creative. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Someone filed anonymous noise complaints about illegal power tools. My trash bin disappeared again. One morning, I found fish guts dumped across my porch, rancid and deliberate. When you grow up by the sea, you learn its rhythms. The tide isn't just water rising and falling, it's a living clock, slow, patient, and merciless. That night, as the waves crept higher and the wind shifted, I knew exactly how long it would take before the ocean reached the lower deck. I wasn't planning to drown anyone. I'm not that kind of man, but I was planning to make a point strong enough to echo in Karen's skull for a lifetime. I waited just out of sight, standing ankle-deep in cold surf. The voices inside grew frantic. A man's tone first, sharp, nervous, swearing. Then a woman's, high panic. They'd realized they were locked in. I heard the window rattle once, then twice. Then came a muffled shout. "Hey! Someone out there!" I said nothing. My cabin was solid. Thick timber, storm-proof, built before building codes had names. The latch I'd installed that afternoon was a heavy marine bolt, meant for hurricanes. They weren't getting out without tools, and judging from their luggage, 2 coolers, a Bluetooth speaker, and a floaty shaped like a flamingo, tools weren't in their inventory. For a while, I just listened to them argue. Something about how Karen said it was fine, and why does this keep happening? That last part almost made me laugh. Almost. I pictured Karen's face when they called her, panicked, realizing the water was inching closer. I could imagine her perfectly, pacing her glass balcony, whispering furiously into her phone, weighing her options between pride and panic. I wondered which she'd choose. Around midnight, headlights swept across the beach road. A white SUV stopped outside the Pearl. Karen stepped out wearing a robe, her phone clutched like a weapon. She looked both ways before storming toward my cabin, barefoot and furious. The tide lapped at her ankles, but she didn't care. She banged on my door, the outer one, not the cabin itself, and shouted, "Open up, this is insane!" I stayed hidden, half in shadow, half in sea spray, watching her struggle to reach the bolted door. She didn't know it yet, but the waterline was already brushing the porch step. "They're in there," she yelled toward the window, her voice half drowned by the surf. "Just stay calm." "It's fine." It wasn't fine. Her guests were screaming now, pounding on the inside walls. The woman's voice broke. "We can't get out," she cried. "The water's coming in." That was my cue. I stepped forward, calm as ever, and said, "Evening, Karen." She spun, startled, eyes wide in the moonlight. You absolute psycho. Unlock that door right now." "Funny," I said. "That's my door. This isn't a joke." She splashed closer, grabbing at my arm. "They could drown." "The tide'll turn in about 40 minutes, I said evenly. "They'll be fine. Just enough to remember whose cabin they broke into." Her jaw dropped. "You locked them in there?" "They locked themselves in," I said. "I just made sure they couldn't wander off again." Karen stared at me like she'd discovered a new species of evil. "You'll go to jail for this." "For securing my property?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "By all means. Call the police." She already had. I could see the phone still glowing in her hand. "They're on their way," she hissed. I smiled faintly. "Then we'll all have a lovely chat." We stood there in silence as the waves reached the cabin's lower deck. The guests were still yelling, though now it was more about something floating and "it's cold" than actual terror. The water wouldn't reach the main floor, not tonight. It never did unless there was a storm surge. But from their point of view, trapped in a creaking old house with the tide rising, it must have felt biblical. When the flashing red and blue lights appeared on the horizon, Karen straightened her posture like she was stepping onto a stage. She'd been waiting for this moment. "Finally," she muttered, adjusting her robe. "Now you'll see." 2 officers got out, local deputies, both of whom I knew by name. The taller one, Rick, had helped me fix a flat last winter. The other, Maria, rented kayaks near the inlet. Rick squinted through the darkness. "Evening, folks. Got a report of a break-in." Karen rushed forward. "This man trapped my guests inside his cabin. They're screaming for help." Rick turned to me, unimpressed. "That true, Mark?" "Not exactly," I said. "They broke in earlier. Twice, actually. I secured the property until you got here." Karen looked ready to combust. "Secured? You locked them in." I shrugged. "The door locks from the outside for storm safety. I engaged it. Didn't know they were dumb enough to come back." Maria glanced at the waterline. "How high's it getting?" "Barely knee-deep under the deck," I said. "They're fine. Scared, but fine." Karen stomped her foot like a child. "You're both missing the point. This man is dangerous." Rick sighed. "Karen, are these your guests?" "Yes." "Did they have permission to enter his cabin?" "Well," she faltered, "it's complicated." "Not really," Rick said. "If they're on his property without consent, that's trespassing." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." Maria was already walking toward the cabin. "Let's get them out first." She unlatched the bolt with her flashlight and shouted, "County Sheriff, step back from the door." Within seconds, the drenched couple stumbled out, shivering and crying, their sandals floating behind them. The man pointed at me. "He locked us in." Maria ignored him. "You need medical attention?" "No," the woman said, glaring. "Just heat." Rick turned back to me. "Want to press charges, Mark?" "Not tonight," I said calmly. "I just wanted them, and her, to understand boundaries." Karen gasped. You can't just, you traumatize them. Rick looked at her. And you sent them into someone else's home. Want to explain that part? Her composure cracked. It was a mistake. I thought. You thought you owned the shoreline, I said softly. You don't. The couple trudged toward her villa, muttering. One of them shot Karen a look that could kill. The police left after taking statements, promising to file it as a civil matter. Karen, drenched and defeated, turned on me one last time. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe, I said. But I'll sleep dry. That night, I did sleep. Deeply, soundly, the way you do when you know you've drawn a line that won't be crossed again. Or so I thought. The next morning, the beach was calm, the tide low, the air sharp with salt. I brewed coffee and stepped outside to find Karen's villa shuttered. For a brief, blissful moment, I thought it was over. Then I saw it, a fresh notice of investigation, taped to my front post. County seal, big red letters. Property inspection due to safety concerns and unauthorized locking mechanism. I didn't need to guess who filed the complaint. Karen was playing her next move, not with guests but with bureaucracy. The kind of battle where she could twist rules and papers instead of admitting fault. The kind of war she thought she could win. By noon, a county inspector arrived, clipboard, reflective vest, zero humor. Mr. Collins? He asked. We got a report of unsafe modifications and potential endangerment of renters. I don't have renters, I said. Report says otherwise. Who filed it? Anonymous, he said, like it mattered. He started photographing the cabin, measuring latch heights, scribbling note. This locking system could trap occupants in an emergency. You'll need to replace it with a compliant release mechanism. I bit back a laugh. So I can't stop criminals from reusing my house? Not with this latch, no. Regulations. As he worked, I noticed Karen on her balcony, sipping coffee, smiling faintly behind her sunglasses. Her victory pose. I gave a small nod, acknowledging the opening round of our new war. She wanted bureaucracy? Fine. I could play that game too, but slower, quieter, and with precision. That evening, after the inspector left, I sat at my workbench and drafted plans. Real, official ones. Because if Karen wanted to use county codes as weapons, I'd use them as shields. The next morning, I'd file a permit, not for repair, but for expansion. A raised deck. A privacy fence. Maybe even a seawall. Everything she hated rolled into one beautiful set of stamped blueprints. As the last light faded, I glanced at the Pearl again. Her windows glowed warm and smug, but I knew better. The sea always wins in the long run. And I had patience. Guests stopped coming. The neighborhood began to thaw. But peace has a funny way of breeding paranoia. One night, as I sat on my porch watching the tide, I noticed movement near the dunes. A flashlight beam swept across the sand, then vanished. When it reappeared, it was closer. Someone was walking toward my cabin again. I turned off my light and waited. The footsteps grew louder, the beam steadier. When the figure came into view, I recognized the shape instantly. Tall, tense shoulders, clutching something metallic. Karen. She stopped just outside my fence, staring at the cabin like she was working up courage. Then she lifted the object, a crowbar, and started toward the back door. I moved fast. I was behind her before she even reached the step. You forgot to knock, I said. She froze, dropping the crowbar into the sand. Her voice trembled. I wasn't going to fix my hinges? She turned, tears of frustration welling. You've ruined everything. The guests, the reviews, the neighbors, they all hate me now because of you. No, Karen, I said softly. They hate what you've done. You don't understand, she shouted. That villa is my livelihood. If I lose it, I lose everything. For a moment she looked human. Desperate, scared, smaller than her arrogance. Then she caught herself and hardened again. But I'll take you down with me if I have to. I picked up the crowbar, set it gently on the step, and said, You might want to leave before I call Rick. She didn't move. For a long, trembling moment, the only sound was the ocean. Then she whispered, "This isn't over." She turned and walked away, barefoot, leaving uneven footprints in the wet sand. The tide came in behind her, erasing them one by one. I watched until she disappeared into the darkness, wondering just how far she'd go before the sea decided it was done tolerating her, too. There's an old saying around here: you can't fight the ocean, but you can learn its patience. Karen didn't understand that. She fought everything: people, rules, even nature itself. She thought persistence and paperwork could tame the tide. Me? I preferred erosion. Quiet, steady, inevitable. The morning after the inspection, I woke before dawn. I didn't even look toward the Pearl. I knew she'd be watching from behind those tinted windows, pretending to sip coffee like nothing had happened. I brewed a pot, sat at my small wooden table, and filled out 3 forms: a coastal improvement permit, a privacy structure variance, and a maintenance exemption for storm protection barriers. Legal words, all perfectly accurate. In plain English, I was building a new seawall and deck that would block half her ocean view. By noon, I was at the county office. The clerk, an older man named Roy who'd known me since I was a kid, took the forms, stamped them, and said, "Karen finally push you too far, huh?" "Let's call it preventive maintenance," I said. He chuckled. "Good luck. She's been in here twice this month filing complaints about everyone's lighting and fencing. She's their most active resident." Active was generous. Obsessive was closer. Roy leaned in. "You didn't hear it from me, but the inspector who came out yesterday?" He filed a note saying her report was frivolous. Might not end well for her if she keeps wasting county time. That was good news, but not my goal. I wasn't looking for revenge through gossip or warnings. I wanted permanence. Something Karen couldn't undo with a call or a signature. When I got back to the beach, the tide was low, the air crisp, and the sand littered with driftwood. I dragged a few heavy planks down from the shed, measuring out the first post holes for my new structure. I wasn't hiding it. If Karen wanted to watch, she'd have a front row seat. Sure enough, within 20 minutes, she emerged. Sunglasses, clipboard, the works. "What are you building?" she called out, walking barefoot across the sand like she owned it. "An improved seawall," I said. "Permitted, inspected, and legal." Her mouth tightened. "You can't just throw up walls without community approval." "Not in my section of the beach," I said. "Zoning's different. Independent parcel, pre-HOA. You remember that part, right?" Karen's voice rose half an octave. "It ruins the aesthetic continuity. I'm more concerned with the continuity of my foundation." She planted her hands on her hips. "Do you have any idea how much your little stunt last night cost me? My guests left a 1-star review. They said your deranged neighbor traumatized them." "Imagine that," I said. "Now I have to offer refunds. This is harassment." "Harassment," I repeated, setting another post into place. "You mean the thing you've been doing since I moved in?" "I was maintaining standards." I smiled. "Standards are subjective. Boundaries aren't." She glared, and for the first time since we'd met, she didn't have a comeback. She stormed off, muttering something about calling the HOA board, even though I wasn't under one. That didn't stop her from trying. The next week was quiet, deceptively so. I finished the first phase of my project. A sturdy, elevated deck that gave me a perfect view of the waves and, coincidentally, blocked her villa's panoramic ocean angle. I caught glimpses of her pacing her balcony every morning, phone pressed to her ear, frustration growing like rust. Then the letters started. The first envelope was from the Coastal Neighborhood Preservation Committee. A warning about unapproved modifications. The second was from her property management company. Community concern regarding visual obstructions. The third, unbelievably, was hand-delivered by Karen herself. Notice of intent to mediate. I read it on my porch while she stood there, arms folded. "You really printed this?" I asked. It's a formal document, she said stiffly. You're violating the harmony clause. I don't have a harmony clause. She smiled coldly. Then maybe you'll enjoy explaining that to the county mediation office. I looked at her for a long moment. Karen, you're aware that this whole stretch of beach used to belong to one family, mine, before it was subdivided? So the boundary lines still run through the dunes, not the fences. Which means that little guest lounge deck of yours technically sits 3 feet on my parcel. Her smile faltered. That's ridiculous. Survey markers don't lie. That night, I pulled out my grandfather's old map, the one he'd used when the parcels were first divided. Sure enough, Karen's deck crossed the line. Barely, but enough. The next morning, I took photos, time-stamped and geolocated. Then I emailed them to the county assessor's office. No threats, no drama, just possible encroachment inquiry. Bureaucracy takes time, but once it moves with weight. For 3 days, Karen didn't speak to me. The silence was almost eerie. Then, on the 4th day, she appeared again, but this time with a different tone, all honey and apology. Mark, can we talk? About what? This boundary thing. It's obviously a misunderstanding. Maybe, I said. But it's a legal one. She exhaled sharply. Look, I know we've had friction. But surely we can find some compromise. I can offer to pay for part of your fence. Maybe even help you refinish your deck. It was almost funny watching her try to play nice. Karen didn't do humility well. I nodded slowly. Sure. I'll think about it. That was all I said. And that uncertainty drove her insane. By the weekend, she'd reverted to form, loud phone calls, fake laughter, and an endless parade of guests who just happened to stand right near my property line. But there was something different this time. I noticed unfamiliar vehicles in her driveway, a black SUV with tinted windows, then a white truck with surveying gear in the back. She was hiring her own people now. A private survey team. A PR photographer. Probably even a lawyer. I pretended not to notice. I worked on my fence, sanded planks, drank my coffee slow, and waited. Because I knew that once she went down this path, she couldn't turn back. She'd escalate until she hit something she couldn't control. That moment came on a Tuesday morning. I was tightening the bolts on my new gate when a shout echoed across the sand. Hey! You're on private property. I looked up. A man in a neon vest and reflective sunglasses was standing near my boundary, holding a survey pole. Karen stood beside him, waving a document like a flag. Actually, I said, you're standing on mine. She scoffed. We're verifying the easement. You'll have to move that fence back. I'll wait for the official record. This is official, she snapped, handing me a printed page. It was a half-finished survey report, unsigned. The storm had done me a favor. It erased her trespass without my lifting a hand. But for someone like Karen, humiliation wasn't an ending, it was ignition. She didn't just want control of the beach again, she wanted redemption in the form of punishment. And I was the most convenient villain. 2 days after the wreckage, I noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. The mail carrier stopped lingering for small talk. The cafe barista, who usually greeted me with a "morning, Mark," started avoiding eye contact. Even Roy at the permit office seemed distant when I came in to pick up paperwork. It didn't take a genius to see Karen's fingerprints on it. She was waging a whisper campaign. The first rumor was that I'd trapped young tourists in my house for ransom. Then it became, the hermit who booby-trapped his property. Someone said I installed motion sensors that triggered alarms at night. Another claimed I'd threatened a county inspector with a harpoon. It was absurd, but rumor doesn't care about logic. It cares about volume, and Karen had plenty. By the weekend, she'd weaponized the community Facebook group. She posted a long, melodramatic rant titled, "When Safety Becomes a Casualty of Negligence." It read like a manifesto, implying my cabin was a danger to families, tourists, and property values. She never mentioned my name outright, but she didn't need to. The comments section did it for her. That old shack should be condemned. I've seen that guy glare at kids playing on the dunes. He's always working on something. What's he hiding? I read it all with coffee in hand, not anger but clarity. She was turning perception into pressure, hoping I'd break or sell. She underestimated how stubborn quiet men can be. That evening, I took a slow walk along the shoreline. The wind had died, the sand was cool, and gulls were picking through the debris left by the storm. The Pearl stood in silhouette. Karen on the balcony again, phone to her ear, pacing. Her villa looked less glamorous now, streaked with salt, one railing missing where the deck had torn away. She was talking fast, gesturing wildly, probably to a lawyer or investor. That house wasn't just her ego, it was her income. And the storm had hit both. I kept walking until I reached the end of the stretch where the dunes curved into public access. That's where I saw something odd, fresh tire tracks leading up to my private driveway. I followed them back and found muddy footprints near my back door. The latch was untouched, but the sand was disturbed. Someone had been there. I checked my cameras. 2 of the feeds were blank. The main one facing the shore was disconnected entirely. The wiring had been cleanly snipped. Someone knew exactly where to cut. Karen. I didn't have proof, but I didn't need it. The timing, the pattern, the ego, it all fit. She was escalating again, moving from gossip to intrusion. I called Rick, the deputy, that night. You sure it was her? He asked. No, I said. But if my cameras keep getting cut, it will be. He sighed. You want me to patrol the area more? Just keep her guessing. The next morning, Karen struck again, this time in daylight. I was sanding the railing when a group of neighbors walked by. A retired couple, a young mother, and a man I didn't recognize. They stopped right in front of my property line. Karen was with them, clipboard in hand. Good morning, she said sweetly. We're conducting a community safety walk. You don't mind, do you? I set the sander down. Long as you stay off my deck. The young mother frowned. Is it true you lock tourists inside your house? Karen's lips twitched upward. Oh, misinformation spreads so fast, doesn't it? She said, pretending to sound concerned. But we all heard something. I met her gaze and smiled. If you're so curious, I can show you the police report. It uses a lovely word, trespassing. You might find it educational. Her mask cracked for half a second. You're twisting things. I tend to straighten them. The group shifted uncomfortably. Karen turned to them. See? This hostility is exactly the problem. Some of us are just trying to maintain civility. Some of us, I said, should stop breaking into other people's homes. The older man coughed. All right, folks, maybe we should move along. Karen followed, muttering under her breath. But as they left, she turned and said just loud enough for me to hear, You don't belong here, Mark. People like you drag down everything around them. I didn't respond. Her words said more about her than me. That night, something unexpected happened. A knock on my door. When I opened it, I found the young mother from earlier standing there, holding a thermos. Sorry about earlier, she said. She kind of bullies everyone. I noticed, I said. She's been calling the HOA about everyone's fences, pets, even lawn chairs. Last month she got someone fined because their curtains were too bright. Sounds like her. She smiled faintly. For what it's worth, I don't believe the rumors. You seem level. I nodded. I'm stubborn, not dangerous. She laughed and handed me the thermos. Coffee. Peace offering. It was a small thing, but it told me Karen's spell was cracking. People were starting to see her for what she was. Still, I knew better than to relax. Karen didn't lose quietly. 2 nights later, the Real sabotage came. I woke to flashing lights and voices outside. At first, I thought it was another storm, but then I heard the words, Fire Department. I grabbed my jacket and ran out barefoot. A small crowd had gathered near the road. One of my garbage bins was in flames, plastic melting, acrid smoke curling up into the night. "Keep back!" someone shouted. Rick was there, extinguishing it with a hose. When he saw me, he grimaced. "You okay?" "Fine. What happened?" "Some idiot tossed a flare or something. Could have spread fast." Karen was standing among the onlookers, hand over her mouth in theatrical horror. "Oh my God, Mark, that's awful." "Yeah," I said coldly. "Real tragedy." She blinked, realizing I wasn't playing her script. "You think I had something to do with this?" I tilted my head. "Did you?" "Of course not," she snapped. "What kind of monster do you think I am?" Rick stepped between us. "All right, that's enough. We'll review the footage from the street cameras." Her face tightened. "Street cameras?" "Yeah," he said. "The county installed new ones last month after those break-ins at the marina." For the first time, Karen looked genuinely nervous. I hope they catch whoever did it," she said, then quickly retreated to her villa. 2 days later, Rick dropped by again. "We checked the footage," he said quietly. "Camera didn't catch her face, but the car matches hers. Midnight. Stopped right by your bin. 30 seconds later, smoke. Can you charge her?" "Not enough to stick. But she's shaken. Knows she's under watch." That was good enough for me. I didn't need jail, I needed silence. For almost a week, that's what I got. The beach grew peaceful again. I fixed the wiring on my cameras, repainted the deck, and let the salt air clean away the last traces of smoke. Karen kept to herself. "Doesn't look it," I said. The man beside her shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we should probably—" "Do your job," she barked. I walked closer, calm, collected. "You're trespassing, Karen." "I'm enforcing property rights." "Then we're even." She glared at me, breathing hard. "You think you can intimidate me with your little traps and fences? You won't win." I smiled. "I don't need to win. I just need you to get tired." She left in a fury, kicking up sand with every step. I watched her retreat to her perfect villa, glass, metal, and misery. That night, I saw the lights on again long past midnight. She was pacing, talking on the phone, probably plotting her next complaint. But the ocean doesn't care about plans. At dawn, a storm rolled in, sudden, violent, beautiful. Waves hammered the shore, wind howled through the dunes, and the surf rose higher than it had all season. I watched from my new deck as the first breaker smashed into the posts of her guest lounge. The structure shuddered, then split clean off at the base, collapsing into the tide. When the storm passed, her deck was gone, washed out to sea like it had never existed. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The next morning, Karen was outside staring at the wreckage, hair plastered, barefoot in the sand. She looked smaller, fragile almost. But when she noticed me, the fire came back into her eyes. "You did this," she hissed. "The ocean did," I said. "Like it always does." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're cursed." "Maybe," I said. "But dry." Then I walked back to my porch and poured another cup of coffee, letting her stand there in silence, the ruins of her pride dissolving with every wave. The Pearl sat empty for weeks. No guests, no cars, no lights at night. The silence was heavier than the storms that used to shake our windows. A "for sale" sign appeared one morning, bright white against the gray dunes, the kind with glossy photos and too many exclamation marks. "Oceanfront luxury. Panoramic views." It looked desperate, like someone selling not property but denial. I didn't celebrate. There's no satisfaction in watching someone destroy themselves. It's just gravity doing what gravity does. Still, I wasn't naive. Karen might have been gone, but her wake lingered. Rumors, scars, little knots of tension that the tide hadn't washed clean yet. The sheriff's department closed my harassment case once it was clear she'd left the county. "Moved inland," Rick said when he came by to update me. "Word is she's staying with family. Probably licking her wounds." "Let's hope the family has good locks," I said. He smirked, but his eyes softened. "You handled it better than most would've. A lot of folks would've taken a shovel to that situation." I prefer paperwork, I said. It lasts longer. After he left, the beach felt unusually quiet. The ocean hummed its usual rhythm, waves folding over themselves, the horizon endless and forgiving. But every night, when the wind shifted just right, I swore I could still hear faint echoes of Karen's voice, complaints, orders, that brittle tone of someone who thought control could hold back nature. A few weeks passed before the real closure came. One morning, a white SUV with a company logo rolled up to the Pearl. A tall man in a polo shirt got out, clipboard in hand. Then another truck arrived, and another, surveyors, inspectors, contractors. I wandered over under the pretense of checking my fence. The man saw me and nodded politely. "Morning. You the neighbor?" "Unfortunately," I said. "You buying?" He chuckled. "Not me. We're here for the new owners. Couple from Denver. Bought it sight unseen." I blinked. "They know about the storms?" "Storms. Never mind." The crew started taking measurements, setting stakes in the sand, planning another renovation. I almost felt sorry for them. The sea doesn't keep secrets, it only waits. That evening, I sat on my deck watching the sunset burn gold over the horizon. The Pearl's empty windows caught the light like blank eyes. For the first time in months, the air smelled of salt, not smoke or tension. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 2 nights later, a knock on my door woke me around midnight. I opened it half expecting the wind. Instead, there she was, Karen. She looked nothing like the porcelain tyrant I'd come to know. Her hair was a mess, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes wild with exhaustion. She held a duffel bag and a folder of papers clutched to her chest. "I need to talk," she said. "Not interested," I replied and started to close the door. She pushed against it with surprising strength. "Please. Just 5 minutes." Her voice cracked, raw and real. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in the middle of my small living room, dripping sand on the floorboards, staring around like she was seeing it for the first time. "It's smaller than I thought," she murmured. "It's enough," I said. "What do you want, Karen?" She opened the folder. Inside were papers. Foreclosure notices, unpaid fines, letters from investors. "They're taking it," she said quietly. "The Pearl. Everything." I said nothing. "I kept trying to fix it," she went on, voice trembling. "Every mistake, every setback. I thought if I just pushed harder, stayed louder, I could make it work. But it's all gone. Even the renters won't come back. My insurance dropped me after the second storm." I leaned against the counter. "So what do you expect from me?" "I don't know," she said. "An apology? Forgiveness? Maybe just someone to admit I wasn't entirely wrong." "You were wrong about everything," I said. "You treated people like they were extensions of your property. You broke laws, lied to cops, destroyed your own peace. And for what? So strangers on vacation would think you owned the view." Her jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that now?" I stared at her for a long moment. "Then why are you here?" She sank into the chair by the window, looking out at the dark wave. "Because I dreamed about the tide," she whispered. "About being trapped in a room while the water rose. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Just waited. It felt like the sea was coming for me." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. After a long silence, she stood. "I'll leave," she said softly. "I just wanted to see it one more time. The beach, the cabin, the place I tried to control." She hesitated at the door. "You know, when you locked my guests in that night, I hated you. But I think that was the first time anyone ever told me no." Then she walked out into the moonlight. I watched her cross the dunes, her figure shrinking against the vastness of the sea until she disappeared. I didn't see her again for days. The next storm came on a Sunday. It started as a drizzle at dawn, then built into a gray wall by noon. The wind roared, waves clawed at the shore, and the sky turned the color of steel. I battened the shutters and stayed inside, listening to the house creak like an old ship. When the storm finally broke, I stepped outside. The Pearl's roof was gone. Half the front wall had collapsed into the sand. Debris littered the shore, planks, glass, furniture. The for sale sign had vanished. The ocean had claimed it all. And near the tide line, something dark floated in the surf. I ran closer, heart pounding. It wasn't a body, thank God, but Karen's duffel bag, soaked and half buried in seaweed. Inside were her papers, foreclosure notices, legal forms, a torn checkbook. All ruined. All washed clean. Rick showed up an hour later, flashing lights cutting through the mist. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "Just debris." He looked at the wreckage of the Pearl and shook his head. "Guess that's one way to close a case." "Guess so." The county declared the property condemned within a week. The new buyers backed out. No one else wanted it. The Pearl became a ghost on the sand, a monument to arrogance and salt. Eventually, the tides pulled at the foundation until only fragments remained. I rebuilt my deck that spring, higher than before, stronger. The fence stood firm, the garden bloomed again, and the sea returned to its steady rhythm. Sometimes tourists wandered by, curious about the empty lot next door. "What happened to that big villa?" they'd ask. "The tide took it," I'd say. They always nodded, like that explained everything. One evening, months later, I found a postcard wedged in my mailbox. No return address, just a photo of a mountain cabin surrounded by pine trees. On the back, one line: "I finally learned to build uphill." No signature, but I didn't need one. I stood there for a long while, staring at it, then tucked it inside my journal. Maybe she'd really changed. Maybe not. Either way, the sea had taught her what I'd known all along. You can't fight nature. Not the ocean, not people, not truth. When the sun went down that night, the horizon blazed orange and pink. The water was calm, the beach empty, the air humming with peace. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, the same spot where this all started, and watched the tide roll in. Not to destroy, not to take, just to remind. The waves reached the edge of the deck, then pulled back again, patient as ever. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a gull cried. The air smelled like salt and cedar. I smiled, whispering to no one, "Boundaries, Karen. The tide remembers them better than we do." Then I leaned back in my chair, listening to the steady rhythm of the surf, the eternal sound of lessons learned the hard way. The Pearl was gone, the beach was quiet, and for the first time in what felt like forever, everything was exactly where it belonged.